Welcome back to another Crowd Control where we talk about all the things going on in crowdfunding. We want to kick things off this week with a game that I feel has been a long time coming. This is called Armello, and this is based on a video game from what feels like almost a decade ago.
From forever, a
At
different
least
time.
6 or 7 years ago. But the funny thing about this is it's a video game that emulates a board game. And this is actually kind of in a time period before there were so many digital board games.
There were not a ton of options back then.
I mean, people weren't even porting real board games over to the digital space as much back then.
Right.
But this thing, I like to kind of look at it a little bit like my first Mage Knight. Because it's hex-based. You're moving around, doing all sorts of adventure-y things, fighting combat, a variety of things to collect points. And in this case, in the board game, you're collecting prestige points, just like the video game. There are some differences, but we've had a chance. It's actually set up underneath this table right now. We're going to play it again. We've had a chance to take a look at it, and the differences, I think, make a lot of sense. This leans a lot more into the deck building side of it, I believe, than even the digital game did. And they did take a few things out, but they still are represented, and not in terribly an abstract way, but not exactly the same way they were in the video game.
It can't be identical. They have to lean into the fun. And I think coming up with a mechanic like leaning into the deck building and like making that a little bit meatier really works for the table.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful game. If you're not familiar with it, got the box right here. You're playing all these sorts of animals in a fantasy setting. And like I said, going around fighting, collecting soul stones, all sorts of things to get prestige. And there's 2 different ways to win, which is kind of interesting. One, you can just get to 70 prestige points. And I don't know if that triggers the end of the game or if that's the winner. But the other way to win is as soon as any player is at 30 prestige, you can enter the palace and try to kill the king and win the regicide way, which I assume. Can you imagine playing this game with 4 people and someone not trying to do that?
You're gonna.
It's gonna happen.
That will happen every single time.
Anyway, it's Armello, and it is on crowdfunding very, very soon, as in tomorrow.
We will have a video up. If you're watching this live today, then the video will probably be tomorrow.
Yes.
But the campaign launches. The next one I want to talk about, we also have content coming up for, and this is Inventors of the South Tigris. This one should be a no-brainer for you if you're a fan of the South Tigris games, or what is being called the Compass Quadrilogy, I guess, because they're going to be doing all four compass directions, he said.
Is it a quadrilogy
when there's 4?
4, but there's 3 of each?
I know, it's a weird...
What's 12?
It's a weird way to do it.
Tell us what 12 is out there, everyone.
But if you liked the North Sea games, if you liked the West Kingdom games, this is the South Tigris. If you've not been paying attention, we had Wayfarers, we had Scholars, and now we have Inventors. And again, like he's done with the other sets in this series, they are thematically tied in together as you're kind of building in the history around the South Tigris. This one is a period of time when inventions were being created and inventors were sailing up and down the Tigris, showcasing their inventions. Yep. So this is maybe a little heavier than some of his previous games.
This is the heaviest. I'm just going to stop Ryan right there. This is easily the heaviest.
It is heavier.
Garfield games. It's the heaviest game in the South Tigris series. Although all of those games are pretty heavy, I would give this one the nod. But Sam and Shem have really put together, I mean, just like we always, when we talk about Garfield games, they've put together a game that feels like the other games a little bit. There are familiar moments, but also feels completely different.
It definitely does. I mean, if you've been following through this series, one component that's had them all together is dice. Each one of these games uses dice in an interesting way, and Inventors is no different. You're kind of changing out this whole pile of white dice you have with these different colored dice, not in the same way you would do it in Scholars, but the way that they brought in, again, a thematic tie of color into the dice, I think just not just thematically ties it in, but also you have a little bit of familiarity. You know, if you play through all these games, they kind of build on each other, at least thematically speaking, from going from the Wayfarers to the Scholars to now Inventors. And this is like the culmination of actually like inventing all of these different inventions. It feels, to me at least, pretty epic as far as like what you're doing in the game. And you're going to have a ton. I mean, it's a big table hog too, with all these invention boards.
If you check out our content, you'll see that it's a big table hog because my player board isn't even on screen. Yeah. I play through a game with Emily, and her player board's on screen.
You really,
I had to put my player board off screen. we'll put some other assets in there so you get an idea of what's going on for sure. But it is a bit of a table hog.
But yeah, it is. But if you like the other games in the series, you don't want to miss this one, of course. But check out our round 1 just to kind of see what the gameplay looks like in a little bit more detail, because there is a lot more going on in this game than we could ever talk about in one crowd control segment.
The last couple that we want to talk about have been running. The first one is called En Route. This is a flip and write game from Crowd Games. And if you've ever played something like Let's Make a Bus Route or the more recent Get On Board from Yellow, this feels a lot like that. You have like a city map, and in this game there's several different cities to choose from. But you are doing a little bit more. You're not only creating routes, and you are writing. You're not laying little sticks on this one. You're creating routes on the streets, but you're also putting tourists and all sorts of other things based on the cards that get played in the different blocks. And the scoring mechanism is a little bit more robust in that respect.
Yeah.
Although it's going to feel familiar if you've played these sorts of games. The other interesting hook is the flipping part, is the player whose sort of turn it is going to play a card face down or face up. Yeah. And then the players next to them play cards face down. Those get flipped. And then the person whose turn it is gets to pick which card is going to be the sort of active card for the round.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a different twist. Also, it's a little, like David said, a little weightier. It's kind of like somewhere between like Let's Make a Bus Route and Bus from Capstone, if you've played that. So,
somewhere. I would say it leans a little more
lighter.
Towards Let's Make a Bus
But
Route.
It definitely has a little bit more going on than your average flip and write, I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
Plus an Arkham map, which is kind of
Yeah, there is an Arkham map. I saw that it was listed, but I didn't look at it very closely.
Yeah.
It didn't, at least the image that I saw in my peripheral vision didn't look creepy or anything. But I'm sure it's going to have locations based on Arkham.
And the last one, this is one I'm really excited about. This is called Etherstone. And the reason I'm so excited about this is Gili and Luciani, who are two of my favorite Euro designers, coming together to make a card game. Well, there's cards, there's dice, there's a lot going on, but thematically, the world that they've built here is very, very cool, very, very pretty looking. They've actually kind of gone all in on this world. I don't know if you saw, there's a world book you can buy that gives
no, I didn't.
Oh yeah, they're all in on it. But the actual game, for me at least, brings some Seasons vibes. A little bit. You've got all these different faction decks. You're building at the start of the game. You're drafting a hand. You're going to have 7 cards, and those are the only 7 cards you've got.
That's the cards.
And then you're trying to play the best game you can play and score the most points by playing those cards in specific ways to collect dice and mana and all these different things that are going to score you points.
Yeah, it sounds like a very streamlined game in that respect.
Very appealing to me.
Most of the game, I think, actually not most, but about half is going to be that draft where you're drafting the cards. And then it's like trying to figure out what order you're going to play in those cards, and then also responding to what other cards are being played at the table, because it sounds like there's a little bit of that, and you want to get these situations where you can really cascade into these big combo things.
We haven't played it yet, but that's what they talk about, the combos on the page, and when you talk about combos in card games, for me, I'm in on that anyway, regardless of the pedigree of design, regardless of how beautiful this world they've created looks. And if you see on the Kickstarter page, you can see all the different factions. They put a lot of love into like creating this world. So to me, that just gives it a little bit extra flavor that you don't find just like in a normal card game, right? Like you're playing these cards that actually relate to something that's happening in the world.
Yeah, it is a beautiful looking game. This is from Thundergriff, who always makes really gorgeous looking games.
Always.
That along with this design team and the mechanics that we've heard of. Again, we haven't played it. Please send us a copy so we can play it. We'd love to play this game.
Two of my favorite designers right here.
But it looks like a really cool campaign that's running.
For sure.
But anyway, that is all the things that we have to talk about this week. If you have any questions about any of them, make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can, or just talk to you about it.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. And join our Discord too, because we'd love to talk about games there as well.
For sure. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.